It's no secret that Tenet is a divisive movie. But no matter what you think, I hope you'd agree that the concept of time inversion is awesome. So let's try to recreate it. My brother and I have wanted to make a Tenet-inspired short film for years, but with how this type of movie would need to work, it was hard to figure out how it would even be possible. I can't actually move backwards through time, or interact with myself, so we'll have to get creative. And second, I don't already own a lot of the props that we'd need, like a white van or a helicopter, and I don't live somewhere that looks like the movie. But even if I didn't have these issues, there's a lot of stuff that there's no way I'd be able to do without the help of visual effects. We're gonna look at how I made a CGI car, a rusty metal sign, and even a fight scene where one of the characters is moving backwards in time. I grabbed some friends and we went and scouted for locations, looking for anywhere that had neat abandoned concrete structures. For this, I was mostly taking inspiration from the Stalsk 12 fight scene at the end of the movie. I live in California, so finding a hot and dry place to film wasn't hard. After we decided on a place, I ripped it off of Google Earth and took it into Blender to make a rough 3D model of the environment. Planning everything out meticulously in 3D before filming would prove to be essential on a project as complicated as one with time inversion. We need guns for this film, and I don't own any prop guns, so I borrowed some airsoft rifles and handguns from some friends. The airsoft guns had orange tips, but we didn't want to break any laws by removing them, so we decided to desaturate them in post and hoped it would look good enough. Shooting this film was extremely difficult for my crew and myself. It was very hot, sometimes above 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 Celsius. We had no bathrooms and had to cram 7 people and our gear into the single car that was able to off-road up to the shooting location. We planned to have a white van, but we didn't find any we could borrow in time, and every rental we looked at would be covered in logos. So instead, for every exterior shot, we just parked my friend's silver hatchback where we knew the van would have to go. This wasn't ideal, but it gave us reference for both acting and CGI reference later on. Over the next year and a half, we shot at the main location 8 separate times. On one day, the entry gate got locked behind us, which trapped us up there, and we had to call the fire department so our cars could get down. Another day, a SWAT team came up for regular training and escorted us down. We went home, took naps, and we came back to shoot 4 hours later. We got several hundred shots. Over 24 are VFX shots. The first shot I want to look at is the very opening title reveal. From day one of this project, I thought it would be really cool if a van drove past the camera and the title was revealed behind it. In fact, that's the whole reason we wrote a van into the script without knowing if we could even get one. Finding the exact 3D model you need can be hard sometimes, especially free ones, but luckily I was able to find a good enough van model. After improving the model, cleaning up the texture, and replacing the tires with a photo scan I found, it was much better. After the van was set up and the wheels were turning, I started building out the scene. I put some mountains in the background, added some fog, and put some smaller rocks in front of the camera. I also added some camera shake when the van drives over the camera. It doesn't necessarily make literal sense, but it feels like it does, and I think it adds some grounding to the shot. After a couple of designs, I settled on this metal text for the title reveal, and with that, the shot was ready to render out. But of course, it wouldn't be a Tenet fan film if it didn't have a van driving backwards. This is without a doubt one of the easiest shots in this film, so there's a lot more work still to be done. The next shot required me to make a sign that would explain the purpose of this room that our main character enters, as well as tie it into the Tenet world a bit more. We started by coming up with different ideas for the sign in Adobe Illustrator. Once we had one we were happy with, I took it into Photoshop and added some graffiti, rust, peeling, and other damage to make it more realistic. After that, I threw it into Blender, added some bending to the metal of the sign, and built out the rest of the scene. This shot will come after a previous shot of the character walking downstairs, so I wanted to add a shadow that passes over the sign to imply his movement. To do this, I did kind of a funny trick where I took a model of Master Chief that I happened to already have downloaded, and I animated him floating down the stairs to cast a rough shadow. It's amazing the amount of corners you can cut in shots like this. I'm pretty proud of the final result here, and I really like how the process shows how many iterations some of these shots can go through. Another but very similar shot, we have another sign, and this time a character needs to climb a ladder in front of it. The obvious issue here is that although the ladder does exist, we don't actually own one of these signs. So the way I fix that is with a digidouble. This basically means we have to make a 3D character that looks like the movie character. They use digidoubles in movies and TV all the time. For example, in this shot from Breaking Bad's Season 3 finale, they ran a physics simulation with CGI versions of the actors for obvious safety reasons. However, I don't have the budget or the skill to 3D scan or 3D model a human this accurately, let alone a way of doing motion capture. So I headed over to Mixamo to look for a similar enough human model. Luckily, I found this gas-masked character that looks similar enough, and he'll only be shown for a second, so it's okay that the mask doesn't exactly match. I threw him into Blender with a climbing animation, and positioned him to match the shot. In the final edit, I think this really fit in with the other footage quite well. That shot's done, but this next one is a lot harder. In Tenet, one of my favorite scenes is the trucks in place sequence. Ludwig Göransson's score is perfect, and the cinematography is incredible, especially on a technical level. In the behind-the-scenes footage, you can see how they closed off miles of road and had cameras on cranes and helicopters. Of course, we can't do any of this stuff with just a DSLR and a dream. For our driving scene, we'll need to get creative. We started by renting a U-Haul and getting a bunch of random angles. In some of these shots, I lied on the hood or hung off the side of the car with my mom as a stunt double. I figured we could just piece a bunch of these random shots together in editing and just hope it would work out, especially because we didn't have the events of this driving scene entirely written out before filming. This was a problem, as you'll see later, as editing together a cohesive scene of driving backwards through traffic using only random shots without any fancy crane equipment is as hard as it sounds. Originally, the film was going to end before we even had a driving scene. However, we lucked out and got access to a cool location that we could only use somewhere at the end of the film. Unfortunately, the day we had the shoot in it was only 2 days afterwards, and we didn't have a script for a scene that would come after our original ending time. So, that script and this driving scene had to be rushed, and that's why there was no shot list. Also, I'm lazy. And to make it worse, we wanted the van to be driving on a freeway, since a good amount of distance needs to be covered for the story. In addition to the real footage, I knew the edit would be 10 times harder without some wider shots of the van actually driving on the freeway, so I made a CGI shot of the van driving by. I took screenshots of Google Earth for the freeway texture, used the same van model I made before, and scattered some rocks near the camera for extra detail. With some sound design, this shot really helps sell the temporal direction of the van. But all this is just our exterior shots. For some of our interior shots, we want to show the exterior as well. However, we can't simply play the footage in reverse. If we did that, then all the cars going the same direction as us would be driving backwards but going towards us instead of away from us, like it would be if our van was inverted and the rest were not. Trust me, it makes sense. That also means most of this B-roll I've been showing you of the freeway is unusable, because it was filmed out of the passenger window on the right side of the road. For some of our interior shots where you can see the outside, because the van is facing the wrong direction of traffic, we combined 2 shots. One of the steering wheel and dashboard, and one filmed out the back of our real-life car while driving on the road. When we combine them and reverse the footage, it looks like the car is driving in the same direction as traffic, but in a backwards car. This driving scene was one of the only times on this project I worried we actually could not accomplish it as well as we wanted because of our lack of equipment for shooting in vehicles. For a long time, none of our edits were satisfying, and because it was just random shots, it felt mostly like a disjointed, hard-to-follow mess. Fortunately, through iterating, simplifying some of our goals, and just creating missing shots in Blender, we were able to get it to a point I'm mostly satisfied with. I hope when you watch it you agree. But there are still a few even harder shots we have to get done first. This grenade that rolls up on a character in this shot was more complicated than it probably looks. The shoot day for the shot rolled up on me, so I didn't have time to buy or make a grenade prop. We brought a bunched up sock that we figured would be good enough from a distance, but that wouldn't cut it here. I was confident I could CGI it later, but it turned out to be a bit more involved than I anticipated. You see, usually I would approach a shot like this by matching the camera angle, adding in some basic geometry to act as the ground and catch shadows, and then run a rigid body physics simulation until I got the grenade roll just right. However, with such a close-up shot, doing such a corner-cutting solution wasn't good enough. The shadows from the grenade are cast over the existing shadows, which isn't realistic at all, and the roll is too smooth, even when I made the surface bumpier, as it doesn't have real rocks to interact with. Instead, it made more sense to find a 3D model of similar looking ground, roll the grenade along that, and add some plants to recreate the original plant's shadows. Having the physical prop would have made this process a whole lot easier, but this extra level of VFX forced me to attempt a much harder shot than I was used to, so it was a good learning experience. The main parts that ended up being hard were figuring out the seam along the rocks between the fake and the real, and running the simulation over and over, tweaking the rotation slightly until the final spot where the grenade stopped rolling looked correct to me. I matched the black levels, white balance, and tint of the rocks plate, and with that, the shot was done. I know I said the last shot is one of the more involved shots I've ever done, but this one is just ridiculous. I wasn't originally going to add it, but a couple comments asked for it, so here it is. This is how I recreated the turnstiles from Tenet in Blender. Turnstiles are the big rotating machines that will invert the direction of time of whatever or whoever's inside. This whole sequence was filmed in a bunker that really was underground. There wasn't much daylight coming in through cracks and the ladder to the surface, and of course there weren't any actual turnstiles down there, or even any cylindrical objects to use as real-world reference for our actors to move around. The room is an old underground missile storage room, so there was this long elevator sunk into the floor that ran the length of the room. Luckily, at the spot where it meets the wall, there is a lift for this missile elevator, and there is a passage behind it that perfectly allows us to have two entrances into the wall about 6 feet apart from each other. We decided to use these as our turnstile entrances. We really had no idea if this would work or not, but we shot the action of me or my brother running into the hole in the wall and went home. It was really difficult footage to work with. For one, there was almost no light down there, which makes most of the shot dark, grainy, and really hard to make out. This meant that my brother, who I forced to do all the rotoscoping work, could barely make out the edges of the dark costume against the dark room. But that wasn't all. Additionally, I forgot to record any measurements of the real room, so placing and sizing the 3D models was mostly guesswork. I started by looking at reference of the turnstiles from the movie, and modeling a mechanism that felt close enough. Then I gave it a worn metal texture. I modeled a room that roughly matched the size of the real one so that I could get more realistic light bounces from it. Finally, I animated the rotation of the turnstile, put all the layers together, and it was basically done. Of course, I had to repeat most of this process for every different camera angle of the turnstiles. This shot, which is a POV of being inside the moving turnstile and then jumping out, required the most creative problem solving to execute. I want to see if you can figure out how I did it in the comments. And now, for the last scene of the video, the reverse fight scene. We took another page out of Tenet's book and included a fight scene between a character going forward in time and one going backwards. This sequence involved minimal visual effects, but it was a lot of very specific editing on top of choreography. To plan out this fight, my buddy Roland showed us some moves that he learned in martial arts that might look cool when reversed. None of us had ever choreographed a fight scene before, let alone one where one person's moving backwards through time, so this was definitely a challenge. In many of the shots, Roland was the stunt double under the mask because he knew how to land safer. It was a shame we couldn't have used myself and my identical twin for this fight, because what more perfect of a use for a twin in a film than playing the same character in a different point in time, but we weren't skilled enough to do these stunts on solid concrete, and Roland knew how to do them safely. After I flipped Roland over my shoulder, he whispered to me that he thought he might have a concussion, and I told him to just walk it off. He would want you to know that this is not because he landed improperly, but because the floor was, again, solid concrete. Anyways, we spent the whole third shoot day filming the fight scene, getting it from lots of different angles and directions. There's an airsoft gun that gets dropped in the fight, but because we didn't want to damage it, I photoscanned it and simulated the 3D model falling instead. I don't want to spoil too much, so for the rest of the fight, you'll have to watch the actual film. Additionally, there's over a dozen other VFX shots in this that I didn't cover here, like the turnstiles and some helicopters. See if you can figure out how we did them. Anyways, after over a year, this short film is finally done, and I'm mostly satisfied with the results. Let's have a look at how it turned out. You can watch the whole thing on my YouTube channel, the link will be in the description. A huge thanks to my crew, and thank you so much for watching until the end.